that is Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra and Gujarat. It opens up a completely new route of India. And there's a huge possibility of monetization of land values. When we talk about monetization is that you open up new areas and create new urban centers. And when you create new urban centers, you should be able to use land as a resource and monetize that resource. Now, land in India, when you look across the world, when you look across America, you look across China, you look across Japan, when urbanization was done in all these continents across the world, all new cities, all infrastructure was state-led. It was financed by the state. It was funded by the government. But in India's case, the imbalance is very high. The imbalance is so high that India's ability to grow at rates of 8 to 9% is hindered by the lack of adequate infrastructure. So if India needs $1 trillion, the Planning Commission says, in the next plan, India doesn't have those resources. So India has adopted a very different strategy. India's strategy is one of private-public partnership, and is born out of our experience that actually the private sector delivers much better than the government. The operation and maintenance of infrastructure in the private sector is much better than in the government. And I think there's good reason to believe that. But when you do that infrastructure creation, there are two things. One is that when you open up these areas, you should be able to monetize land values. Now, land is a highly contested issue in India, number one. Secondly, land in India is highly political in nature. It's a very political subject because political parties and politicians have become rich on account of land. And actually, land values, wherever urbanization has taken place, the rise of land values has been captured in those cities. And therefore, it has led to more and more cities to be created. In India, we've not been able to capture the land values, and actually if India has to urbanize, those land values must be captured in that cities, rising land values. That's number one. Number two, that when you are getting into a project of this nature, it's very necessary to work with good planners. When you plan for a new city, you don't plan for 10 years or 15 years. You're actually planning for the next 100 years. You're trying to create a new Mumbai or a new Chennai or a new Calcutta as industrial cities. But a logical consequence of that is that workers will move for manufacturing, but their wives, their children will move. So when you plan for schools, hospitals, you plan for manufacturing areas, but you also plan the softer elements of it. And therefore, it's very important to look at the learning lessons from across the world and capture them into this process and create a new city for the next 100 years. And the city must grow and evolve on the back of a public transport system, the mass transit system. This must all be transit-oriented development. So one of the challenges we've had is to really think big and think large and have the vision to plan for 100 years. And the first lesson which I would say is that it's very important for Indians to start thinking big and start thinking large and planning for 100 years. Our infrastructure building has been building, we've been building for the next 10 years. And the demand-supply imbalance has been so large that we are not able to, whatever we are building is getting just capped up, it's getting fulfilled in the next 3 to 4 years. And therefore, Indians need to plan for 100 years. And for planning that, let me tell you, it's very important to look at global experiences and bring in some of the world's best planners from across the world. So, one of the things we did was to really look across and bring in some of the world's best master planners who've designed new cities for us. Dholera in Gujarat, 973 square kilometers. Singapore is just 710 square kilometers. So we are planning for a city which is actually bigger than Singapore and Gujarat. We've already finished the acquisition of land pooling of about 400 square kilometers. We are doing 2 cities in Maharashtra, Dighi, and a smaller city near Aurangabad called Shendra. We are doing Pitampur Dharmao in Madhya Pradesh. We are doing a city beyond Nimrana in Rajasthan, and Manesa Bawal beyond that in Haryana. Now, one of the things we tried to do was to bring in good master planners from across the world. And these are people who planned these cities. And once you plan these cities, it's very important that you should be able to work with the state governments. So you work with the state government, and the state governments acquire the land for this. And that is what has been done. And when you do the acquisition of land, you have to then get the plans notified by the state government. And once you've got the plans notified, you get into detailed engineering of these projects. But before you do detailed engineering of these projects, and this is not one project, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, this is a huge, vast program with several projects. And therefore, we move beyond the contours of a project management to a very vast area of program management. And you move into an area where program management becomes the key, not just one single project, but hundreds of projects in a city. You're doing mass transportation, you're looking at water, you're looking at power, you are looking at drainage, sewage, and because you're creating cities of the future, it's very important to bring in an overlay of information, communication, and technology, the ICT master planning. So as I said, when cities were created across America, they were created as sprawling cities with verticals. But one of the big things that's happened, one of the revolution that's happened is that digital technology has enabled us today to create smart cities of the future. And smart cities means that you create a central command room. And from that central command room, you manage your water, you manage your power, you manage your public safety, you provide education and health from a room half the size, just this big. And digital technology, that is what is called by IBM today a smart city. Cisco is calling it smart and intelligent city. The Koreans, where the mobile telephone companies have created a revenue model out of it, is calling us as ubiquitous cities of the future. And therefore, it's digital technology which is driving urbanization. Digital technology enables you to control and manage a city. And therefore, since India has been a very reluctant urbanizer, the only way we can catch up with the rest of the world, and the only way we can far surpass the rest of the world, is our ability to use technology to make a quantum jump. And how best we can use digital technology today, use the power of the broadband to make a quantum jump in urbanization process. And that holds the key to the future of India's urbanization process and its manufacturing process. And therefore, you need geographical planning, you need detailed designing, you need a very vast area of program management. But you need more than that, you need digital technology. So one of the things which we've done, and I run a very small organization actually. I run a very large organization in its reach, in its outlay, but I run a very small organization in terms of the number of people who work directly with me. I outsource everything that I have. I have the best resources for planning. I have the best master planners from the world. I have the best detailed engineering companies, and I work with the best program management companies from across the world, from Jacobs to CH2M to AECOM, across Parsons, all of them work for me. And let me tell you, the skill of program management are immense. The skills are enormous. Just to give you one example, London Olympics, hundreds and hundreds of projects, about 186 projects, 65 different agencies. CH2M was the program manager. They delivered 8 months ahead of time. I went to this completely new city called Punggol, created by Singapore. And last election, the existing government, their vote pattern came down simply because they couldn't provide them housing, couldn't provide its people housing. So they created a new city. 10 square kilometer city called Pungal, but in 10 square kilometer they created 100,000 houses. 100,000 houses, and yet 38% of the area is absolutely green. So the future is high density. What they say is that you first bring in transportation. They brought in BRT, they brought in MRT, they brought in LRT, and then they went vertical. And a very high level of density, but they say that high livability and high density actually goes together, and clustering of services together reduces your energy consumption by almost 35%. Because you've already brought in transportation. And close to the transportation nodes, you can go as vertical as you can because land is so scarce. And because you've done that, you've actually reduced your consumption energy needs. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, the future of India, according to me, is a very big drive towards manufacturing. It's a drive towards urbanization. It's a drive towards excellence in program management. It's not just about project management. It's about a whole range of issues of project management. In fact, series of projects, which is a vast area of program management. So one of the things we certify for the project director is that he must have a certified degree from the PMI. And because there are issues of change management, there are issues of risk management, there are issues of scheduling, and there are issues of delivery on time, ahead of time, and on cost schedules. And therefore, this team holds the key. He becomes your right arm, he becomes your left arm, he becomes the eyes and ears of the project. And without a project, without a program manager and a project manager, no project in India can ever be delivered ahead of time and on cost schedule. And therefore, the future is dependent on this. Because the program manager comes in and he actually validates, for the first year, he must validate the project. He must, quite often, because infrastructure has largely been created by government, government prepares projects which are not based on realities. And quite often, projects get delayed. And why projects get delayed? And one of the things we do in our project is that we form special purpose vehicles. We form SPVs, and actually we take all approvals first. So we take close to about 42 to 44 clearances and house them in that SPV, in that special purpose vehicle. So we take the water clearance, we take the land clearance, we take the environmental clearance, which incidentally in India is quite a nightmare. And you take about 42 odd clearances and put them in that SPV. And actually then you bid out that SPV. So when you move towards the concept of private-public partnership, it's a project of risk allocation. PPP is nothing but risk being shared by those who are best equipped to do them. And what the government has to do is to de-risk projects. And if it has to de-risk project, it must get all the approvals and house them in that SPV. And therefore, we take all those approvals and put them in that SPV, and then we'll bid out that SPV so that it can get into process of quick, fast, and speedy implementation. Now, I've said the importance of detailed engineering. I've said the importance of program management. I've said why program management holds the key to the success of India's future in the next 4 decades. But let me tell you, behind all this, while program management is a science and an art, and everybody will talk to you saying that it's a big science, well, let me tell you that program management is about passion. Behind everything, there's a human being. And ultimately, projects are driven by the passion with which you drive it. And unless and until project managers will deliver if they have the passion to deliver the project. And if you do not have the passion to deliver the project, if you can't lead your team, if you can't empower your team, if you do not have the conviction to deliver it, it will never be delivered. It can be a science and an art, but it will never get delivered if you do not own that project and deliver it with the greatest amount of passion and your own faith in that project. And therefore, ultimately, projects are made or marred by individuals and by the leaders who drive them. And if you look across the world, successful projects have always been delivered by individuals who have built a great organization or a great team behind it. So, ladies and gentlemen, there's a huge opportunity for India. Next through 3 to 4 decades, India will be building a completely new India. You need a totally different, innovative, and creative approach. You need a far more sustainable growth. You need a growth to charter out a green growth of strategy. And you need to do this, if you get your master planning right, you build a transit-oriented development. And that's why you're seeing so many new projects on metros being driven in India now. Every city wants a metro. And therefore, to my mind, there's a big opportunity, but there's a big challenge. And the challenge is of big thinking, challenges of bringing skills, challenges of bringing the best program management skills into this project and delivering and creating a new India which only good young program managers and project managers sitting in this room can do. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I will be happy to respond to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, sir. There are volunteers with mics. Yes, the gentleman on my left with the blue shirt. Sir? Yes, sir.
Yeah. Mr. Kant, you know, I saw India through you today, and it's amazing to see it. I'm a civil engineer myself and an environmental engineer, but I felt, you know, which direction India going, you know. And I don't know, in this audience, anybody thought that they would like to make their kids be engineer, you know, because everybody thought of getting into IT and people engineer getting into IT in last decade or so, but it's amazing to see what India has to offer, you know. Do you have any suggestion to these people who, I felt, you know, I did my master's from US and came to India and been involved with PMI for last decade and a half, but it's amazing to see the opportunity India holds, especially in infrastructure, you know. Any message to those people who are so passionate about IT? It's a wonderful thing, but I think there is much beyond just what we are seeing on the surface of the, you know. So anything, any suggestion to the people here? Thank you.
You know, as I say, the biggest challenge for us is to be able to create jobs in India. You know, must understand this, why I'm saying. I say this because, you know, if you're going to get 350 million young Indians, you must understand, 350 million young Indians getting into this process. You know, the worst thing we as Indians can do is to have passed through what we call as a window of demographic transition of 70% of your population below the age of 35 and having these people as unskilled workers. You will have a revolution on hand. You know, one of the major causes of what has happened, what we call as the Arab Spring, is simply because the Arab leaders do not understand